Katie Despres. She's a family and systemic constellations facilitator. Welcome to Voices of Elevate. Just let me know and let the viewers know what constellations are. What does that mean?
Well, it's not horoscopes, that's for sure. Which a lot of people ask me, has it got something to do with zodiac signs? And no, constellations is about looking at human systems, just like looking at a constellation of stars, for example. When we look up in the sky, we may only see one star, but actually there's loads and loads and loads of stars there, and they're all connected. And some of them make shapes and systems and patterns, and some of those shapes, systems, and patterns have names. And human systems are exactly the same. So in constellations, what we're doing is we're looking at human relational systems. We're looking at how humans are directly interdependent, relational, interconnected beings, and that we feel on behalf of each other. And we are connected to a knowing field in which information from all of the different things that have happened in our lives, whether that's from the generations that came before, the families that we're in, the work systems we're in, the health systems we're in, the nature systems we're in, all of this information is collected in a field, and it affects and has an influence on all of us and how we live our lives.
And you said that none of us are actually individual, are we? Because we're all being influenced by these same constellations.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we realize the more we look at things systemically and the more we look at human systems is that a lot of us believe that we're individuals, that we're on this individual path, making individual decisions based on our personality or our fate and choices and things. But what systemic constellations really lets us know is that actually we're very influenced. Those choices that we make, maybe the fears that we have, maybe the struggles we have, maybe the repeat patterns that we have, are connected to the human systems that we belong to. And these human systems are directly influencing the choices that we make in our lives, the patterns that we have in our lives. So we don't come here alone, and we're never alone as far as systemic constellations is concerned. And what's lovely about constellations is it gives us an opportunity to look underneath the surface at what might be influencing the way that we're behaving. I mean, this could be your relationship with money, for example. You know, the repeat patterns that we have with money, and why do we feel guilty when we have money? I mean, success guilt is a repeated pattern, as well as things like working with addiction, working with relationships with food, never mind your relationships with your parents or your siblings, relationship with your health. And constellations helps us look underneath the surface at what might be influencing, what information is in the field that we all come from, what information is there that might be useful in helping us look at something differently, so that we can expand our view on how we're seeing things from a very individual lens to a much more significant systemic lens. What did I inherit? What is showing up in me? And maybe with that new information and that new perspective and that new direction or distance of which you're in relationship to what's showing up, might create more movement. And so what we understand about systemic constellations is that what happens is things get stuck. What was unfinished in a previous generation, something that happened in a previous generation, what was unfinished shows up again in future generations. And not as punishment, not as fate, but as a way of systems finding a way to balance themselves, to look at belonging, to look at exchange, to look at identity, to honor that which came before and have it relevant to where we are today. So these systems are looking for movement again, and constellations is a way of creating movement in a system that has got stuck, without going into deep analysis, without blame, but ways of looking at things to reintroduce movement. And it's a very beautiful and touching process, because whether you come to a constellation because you want to look at something that's going on in your life, or whether you're willing to come to a constellation as a representative, which is a big part of this work, where you come along to a group constellation and you say, I'm willing to represent something in someone else's human system. And that might be
Mm.
you represent someone's family member. It might be the land that that family had to leave when they were had to migrate for whatever reason. It might be the essence of love. But when you come along to a constellation willing to say, I'll help, I'll be useful, I'll represent in this piece of work, the insights that you get for yourself and about your family system are so great that not anybody, nobody that comes to a constellation doesn't receive something in the process, whether you're the person with the issue, the person that's representing, or just someone that's willing to sit and witness the process. Everybody receives an insight, not just for themselves, because this isn't individual work, but for the whole of the systems that they belong to.
Wow. So what does the workshop look like? So when you're in there, you mentioned about if you're the one, witnessing or receiving or whatever. What does it look like within the workshop?
So when you come to one of my group workshops, there's a group of people that have all decided to turn up for various different reasons. There's people there that don't know why they're there. There are people that have been drawn to it. There are people there that know exactly what they want to do, or maybe have some predetermined idea. And that's what's really interesting about the work, is it's phenomenological, which means we deal with what appears in the moment. Yeah. So we actually never know what's going to happen, no matter how sure we are. So a group of people randomly turn up at a constellation, and some of them come knowing that they want to look at something. I want to look at my relationship with my mother. I want to look at my relationship with my partners, what's been repeating. I want to look at why I can never be happy with my own success, or why I refuse to take the steps that I need to in order to live a life more fully. What stops me from living my life more fully? And that's the things that we look at in a constellation. What's come from before that's showing up now at this as this pattern. So you might be the person that comes along and says, I've got an issue that I want to explore. And then everyone else in the constellation will be invited to take part as a representative. And a representative is where you stand up and basically lend your body to someone else's piece of work. So you may be a representative for this person's mother or this person's brother. But what happens when you step into a constellation is what you feel in your body belongs to the representation. And a lot of people are very shocked by this, very
Mm.
shocked by the fact that they suddenly experience feelings in their body that they've never felt before, that they don't know about, that don't belong to them. But then this is where we deeply realize in a constellation that I feel on behalf of you. I am because you are. Yeah. And then the other people that show up, maybe they just want to witness, they just want to sit and hold the circle with me and observe what's going on. Or they might not be picked to represent, or they choose not to represent. So there's generally three parts: issue holder, representative, and witness. But there is something in the piece of work for everybody that shows up.
Mm. It's funny when you were talking about it and kind of aligning it and transferring it to the mission of Elevate. I always the constellations almost it's almost like the dimensions that we get stuck in. If you think of it as like frequency, what we become resonant with in life is because of our backgrounds and because of how we were taught at school, or how our parents taught to us, or our traumas. They kind of keep us in these frequencies, and it's almost like you're indirectly working with the frequency of where we might find. That's what I'm kind of picking up on what
Yeah.
you're
And
saying.
it's exactly, well, I mean, what's really interesting is, we talked about vitality, is that a constellation is a flow of life. And
Mm,
constellation looks at the systems that we all belong to. And the systems care mainly about one thing, and that is that life continues, that the life force which created us, which created our parents, which created our
mm,
grandparents, and so on and so forth, this life force has been pushed through. And we are living proof that life won over difficulty, that
mm.
life won over struggle, because we're
Stop,
actually
stop.
here. Yeah, and this is, and so
Yeah.
it's all about this energetic force of life pushing its way through a system. Like when you see that daisy popping up through the concrete, that is what life is about. And so,
Yeah.
yes, we're tapping into the same thing. And what's beautiful about a festival is that it's all different people from different walks of life that show up. And that's what a constellation is. A constellation is all different people with all different experiences showing up, knowing that they're connected. And we create this vitality, we create this life force when we come together. And that's what a constellation is. The life force moving through us that has got stuck or halted in some way and needs to be looked at. What has created this stuckness? And if we look at it, can we reintroduce the flow of movement and life so that we can live our life to our fullest? And one of the things that we often say to our ancestors in this work is, please bless me if I live my life more fully or more easily than you could. And that's
Mm.
what the ancestors want. You know, those that pass life on want life to continue. And that's what a constellation is looking at. How do we reintroduce the movement of the life force so that life can continue in all of its fullness?
Tell me, how did you get into constellations?
Well, ironically, it was, I don't want to say ironically, but through my yoga teacher training, I trained as a yoga teacher. And my yoga teacher, so a lot of people will know Yoga Sara in Bristol. Well, my yoga teacher was also trained in family constellations, and part of my yoga teaching required me to do some deep personal work. And one of the pieces of personal work that I had to do was a family constellation. And suddenly it was like someone had given me a language for everything that I had been experiencing in my own personal self, and also what I was seeing showing up in other people. And yoga gives you this like this grounded ability to sort of stay and to work on your relationship with self. You know, yoga is the path to like remaining, to staying, to being here, and working on your relationship with self and everything else. And so it's constellations. It's like the same language. It's like developing a capacity to be able to include more, to be able to include everything that exists. Because a constellation says, systemic constellations say, everything that ever existed has a place. Yeah. Whether we can see it, whether we believe in it, whether we understand it, whether we agree with it, it has a place. Just because I suddenly decide that I no longer like or agree with something doesn't mean it no longer exists. And what we say in
Mm.
constellations is that which we deny or exclude, we actually bind ourselves more closely to. So
Mm.
yoga gave me this language about capacity and connection and relationship. And then suddenly constellations came along and it took me to this much, much deeper place because I have always had an interesting relationship with belonging. And I didn't know what that interesting relationship belonging was until I was in my late 40s. In my late 40s, I discovered that the person I believed was my father was not my father, which also meant that I suddenly found out that I come from a different land than I thought I came from, different
Mm.
cultures than I thought I came from. And I've always felt like I didn't belong. And the more that I looked into this relationship with this man that is my biological father, the more I began to find out information about him. I realized that he also too didn't know his father. So something has repeated in my family system that is showing up. And so I've always had this situation for myself around where do I belong? Who am I? What's my identity? Where do I fit in? And I didn't really know what was going on for me. And constellations suddenly offered me a language to look at what I was personally experiencing and then help me work with other people that are also, because most of us have got questions around belonging, you know, whether
Mm.
that's our identity, our culture, our history, the lands that we're from, whether that's our belonging around illness, disability, neurodiversity, sexuality. We've all got something that we're all familiar with, and that is this
Mm.
sense of belonging. And what I've now learnt and understood is that that often isn't just about what we're experiencing now, it's about what we're being influenced by, that our ancestors experienced, the lands they had to leave, the places they weren't allowed to belong, things that women had to go through, things that
Mm.
lots of different people, wars and migrations, and that's showing up in all of our relationships now. You know, I'll
Mm.
remember, we remember our ancestors unconsciously because all systems have memories, and they don't just have memories of things that have been spoken. Systems carry unspoken memories, and belonging isn't something that we think about. Something belonging isn't a belief system. Belonging is something that is innately felt by all of us. And
Mm.
systemic constellations really bring something to the forefront, to the surface around what it feels like to belong or not to belong, and what
I think belonging as well. What's coming up for me when you talk about that is actually quite a primal instinct, isn't it? Because we're pack animals, aren't we? We're tribal animals. So I think because we don't live in a village, like, I mean, I do live in a village, but it's not a like my neighbors don't like me. So it's like it's not I don't know that they don't like me, but we don't have that kind of relationship. We don't have that kind of, like, we would have belonged to a tribe, and that's something that's kind of missing for us, isn't it, in a lot of ways. So I think the belonging piece is something that's this kind of primal desire and connection, a bit like when you take a dog away from a pack and it's in solitude, or a monkey or something, they're used to being, and so something doesn't feel right. It's like, I'm supposed to be. So I think and within a tribe there would have been its own constellation, wouldn't it, of how you lived day to day, and what the men would hunt and the women would gather, that kind of thing. It was all kind of, and then you would just be programmed into living in that dimension, and
with those
and
belonging rules. Yeah, and
yeah.
exactly that. The constellations work was was discovered when Bert Hellinger, the founder of this work, was working as a missionary out in Africa, out in the Masai
Mm.
Mara, and it was there that he began to understand how different systems work, about how the ancestors are always included and how the ancestors are always honored, that he understood that what came before must always still have a place. And
Mm.
also belonging, what it's like to belong, and what's it like to be excluded, and also the balance of exchange, the how we work with exchange within all of our human systems. So this work goes right back to its roots in Africa.
Because we don't actually touch on, we might have photos up of our grandparents or perhaps great grandparents and know who they are, but beyond that, we don't really honor that, do we, in our own culture? Whereas I think in other civilizations around the world, they kind of tell stories about those people, don't they, and different things, so they'd have a real belonging to their lineage. But I think in recent years we've really started with healing and spirituality kind of like really accelerating, and we've all been doing this kind of ancestral healing. I think that's now opening up a kind of understanding for how much we are affected by what came before
What came
us.
before, and
Yeah, yeah,
family constellations on those bases is really help a way of helping people understand how directly we are connected, that
yeah.
we're all part of systems, these systems influence. And I think when we're looking at what's going on around the world, and what some of the individual identities that we've all been working with, through being told that we've all got to do more, make more, have more, etc. I think we're slowly beginning to see that we are part of a system, and that the only way that things can function is that when we remember that we're all part of a system, and that we need healthy systems, whether these healthy systems are with nature, whether these healthy systems are with food, whether these healthy systems are how much we work, and how much we think it's important to be at work or work hard or whatever, how we raise our children, how we parent, how we come across in the world. It's all to do with systems. It's
And a lot of those systems that have come before us have been quite stifling and kind of created what some would call the matrix, isn't it? It's kind of created this kind of one big system. But like, the more that we get to understand this and see beyond it, the more we get to create a whole new system, isn't it? And that's kind of what I envisage with where we're going next. It's like, well, what do we want to create from, you know, next for the next generation? So what are we giving to the next generation? Not just what have we inherited, but what are we
What are we doing
passing
next?
forward? Yeah,
I mean, I'm a
yeah.
parent myself, and I would say that part of my interest in this systemic work was because I'm more familiar with the intergenerational patterns within my own family system than now the
Mm,
spoken and the unspoken ones. I'm much more familiar with my children's father's intergenerational patterns and how it was really important for me that some of these patterns didn't continue with our children. Now, it's not something that you can stop, but it is something that you can become more aware of. Yeah.
mm,
I can be, well, I've been doing a lot of work myself with my ancestors and my systems to basically say, I'm going to return to you what's yours. I'm going to keep with me what's mine. And I'm hoping that that creates more freedom and more life force for my children, because in order to receive life fully, in some ways, we've got to find a way of honoring our parents. Now, that can be a
yeah.
really tricky subject for some people, because that doesn't mean our parents are okay. It doesn't mean our parents made wise choices. It doesn't mean that our parents were great people. But one thing that came through our parents is life. And without them, we wouldn't exist. And so in this work, there is some honoring of that life force. And that doesn't mean we have to like or forgive, but we find a way to agree to receiving the life force that has been passed on to us and taking it and living it well. And whether that means we then pass it on in the form of our own children, or whether it means that we pass it on in the relationships that we have with how we look after nature, the projects we build, the creative forces that we are, the things that we offer to the world, that's all a life force being passed on. But in order to pass on life, you need to be able to fully receive life. And constellations takes us to a place where we put into place that which came before us, and we acknowledge it, and we take the life from it and then pass it on. And that's what I
Mm,
love about what I've learned about constellations. It's really
yeah,
changed my attitude towards life
yeah,
and the way that
yeah.
I see things and the way that I interact with the world. And that's something beautiful that I see happen in so many constellations. When people come to constellations, it's like a little part has been reawakened in them. And they
Mm,
see things in a constellation and hear things and witness things that makes them realize, gosh, this is not just about me. I'm not
mm,
on my own in this, even though it might feel like it. And just seeing that reconnection to the matrix of life force is
mm.
what makes this work so worthwhile. So I really hope people come along and experience it.
Yeah. Well, I want to.
Yeah. Well, I'll be running an introduction. So
Yeah, that's right. You'll be doing an introduction. So how long will that be and what will that
well,
involve?
each workshop is going to be an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how much time we've got. So I'll run an introduction to family and systemic constellations, which will be an opportunity for people to come to a workshop and take part in experiential exercises. Because as I said, this is not something that we know about cognitively. Belonging is something we feel. Yeah, these are things, something that we feel. So I'll be running some embodied experiential exercises to give you a flavor and a sense of what it is that we've inherited, what it is that we share between us, how it is that we things that are influencing our lives. So the experiential workshop will be something that people take part in, and that'll give everyone a flavor of what constellations are, what's going to happen in a constellation. And then the next day, I will run an actual constellation when we've got a safe space where people can come to, and you can
I was actually
fully take
thinking
part.
about I was actually thinking about you doing the introduction on the Friday and then the constellation on the Sunday.
Great. Yeah.
So it's like a day in between.
Yeah. Yeah. And then people can come and find me on the Saturday if they want to talk to me about about the
Yeah.
Sunday. But the Sunday is a commitment. Coming to the workshop, if we do the workshop on Sunday, coming to an actual constellation, what we'll do within an hour and a half, we will run one, possibly two constellations. So one person will come and sit with me, and those what we'll do is you can put your name forward if you'd like to have your own personal constellation. Names will be chosen at random. That person will come and sit with me, and the rest of the group will help constellate by stepping into the field, the issue that the person is bringing. And that you will need to stay for the whole of the workshop. It's not something you can dip in and out of. It is a commitment.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. And we're
I
gonna
really look forward to doing it at Elevate.
yeah, well, we're going to shut the tent up, aren't we? So you've got some nice privacy as well, so that you can all get lost in this kind of field that you'll all be working in. When you mentioned field, before we started, and I asked you how you pronounced your surname, Despres, and what did you say the meaning was?
The translation is of the fields, and although it wasn't my birth name, it wasn't the name that I was given at birth. It was a name that I received through marriage and adoption. It translates as of the field, and constellations work is also known as working with the knowing field or working with the field of consciousness. So I've ended up with a name that I wasn't
Yeah,
originally
love
given
that.
that basically says the work that I do. So
Yeah.
and we're not getting together until end of August. So
Mm.
in the meantime, if anybody, is hearing this and watching this and wants to know more, I run monthly constellations in Bristol. I run a evening constellation circle, third Thursday of every month in Redcliffe. And some people come every single month just
Oh
to be
wow.
part of this relational, interconnected field, to feel this connection and this community, to do this deeply embodied work.
It's
Um,
such a community thing, isn't it? Because when everyone's supporting one person to heal, really, so
well,
that's quite a community spirited, I can imagine it really connects people,
it's
very
beautiful.
deeply.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
I
do
can
them
just,
third Thursday of every month in Bristol. I do them every other month in Chepstow. So you can come to my constellation in Chepstow, just quickly over the bridge.
mm,
And I also run full weekends where I do a day, and there's one coming up in June, the next one's coming up in June. I do a day where I train people on this work, not training you to be a facilitator, but
no,
training you to look at things systemically, to use constellation type approaches, to look at things that are happening in your own life, but also not just personally, but also professionally. If you're a therapist or a facilitator of some sort, if you run an organization with teams, coming and doing a day with me where we look at what is playing out that maybe we're not able to fully see. So I train people on systemic methodology for a day, and then the next day we go fully in and do a full day of constellations. So we do about 5, 6 constellations in the day. So some people come for the whole weekend to immerse themselves in this work. Some people
mm,
come to one day, or some people come to the training day or to the full day of constellations. But yeah, and a lot of people also come to see me one to one. Not everybody wants to bring their personal issue to the group for whatever reason. So I
mm,
work with people one to one. Because we don't have people to represent the elements of your issue,
mm,
we use props, we use other things,
okay,
or
mm,
visualization. Or sometimes we're out in nature and we use the trees,
true.
we use the
Yeah,
plants,
amazing.
we
Yeah,
use whatever shows up. The animals that show up in a constellation are
I
all
will.
relevant, all
Yeah.
relevant.
It's funny because when you were talking earlier, a big fly went bzzz past me.
This is it.
I
What
thought, oh, what's
when
that?
we're running constellations, we say that everything that appears is relevant. Everything
Yeah.
that appears is relevant.
What was really coming through as well when you've been speaking is something that I really latch hold of because I kind of coach people into their purpose and stuff is how your story, your own personal story, and how you didn't know your father and then you did, and then it was like, okay, it was like all these things that could be a trauma, could be not ideal in our background, but how it's led to the magic of what you offer the world. It's like how that's all meant to be. It's all part of your path because of how you're now showing up for other people and how you really understand that journey for them. And I just think that's like beautifully on purpose, when it happens in that way. I just think
No,
it's
I
yeah.
completely agree. I think the more I've realized now that my own experience with not belonging is what has allowed me to sort of, what we call in this work is the ability to sit with that. I can sit with that in myself now, but I also can sit with it in other people. And
Mm,
systemic work and constellations work is very much about coming to look at what's influenced. But what's also really key is, I know lots of people are now familiar with the term intergenerational or ancestral trauma, that which is unresolved in a previous generation that then shows up in the following generations as repeat patterns, relationships, and issues with illness and disease. So,
mm,
yes, we're aware of the epigenetics. We know now that information and memory is passed through the gene structure. And sometimes those gene structure express themselves in one particular generation, or they express themselves in another generation. So we've got the burdens, or otherwise known as the trauma. But as what I just want to re-emphasize that it's not just the trauma that gets passed down through generations, it's also the gifts of
yeah.
resilience, the gifts of survival, the gifts of humor, the gifts of
Mm,
creativity. And the biggest gift is life itself, because the gift that's been passed to each of us is life. That's why we're both just sitting here. As I said
mm,
before, life won over the burden, life won over the struggle. And that is, we're living proof of where life won over what came before, So the
well,
gifts of the
that's
burden.
it's such a vibrational reframe. We can get caught up so much because we have to do our own personal healing, and it's often because of negative things that have happened through family lines. But when you were saying about the things that we'd inherited, the humor, that is so from
Mm.
my family. We turn everything into a joke. We never take anything way down. Sometimes that's a problem because you can't talk seriously about
Yeah.
things when you need to. But I think I'd rather have this more joyful experience with my family. So actually that's a real positive. And I think, anyone listening, that can really resonate with, the ancestral traumas, just spend a minute and maybe really think up a few things that you've really benefited
Mm.
from having your family, because there's lots. um yeah yeah, I
Very
love
much
that.
so. Yeah, it's
And that,
really important.
yeah, yeah, really important. So where can people find you then between now and Elevate?
Well, at my monthly constellations.
And how can they find out? How can they book on? Where do they
So
find you?
website is katiedepres.com, so just my name.com. And on there are all my offerings, or on Eventbrite, you'll find me as well. I've just been at
Yeah,
Shindig Festival for the weekend,
yeah.
so I ran introduction and did talks on why your life might not be your own at Shindig Festival. And you can look on my website, and it lists all of my workshops. So in June, I have got 4 workshops. I've got my monthly circle in Bristol, my circle in Chepstow, and my full weekend in June. And in addition to that, I'm a yoga teacher, and I run 6-week courses to introduce people to yoga. And of course, my yoga has influences my constellations. My
Mm.
constellations experience influence my yoga. So when people come and join one of my 6-week courses, which next one starts in the middle of June, you're going to get a mixture of yoga and constellations, because they're the same language. They're the
Yeah,
same.
I love that as well. Yeah. And that's what really makes your offerings your own flavor, because you're
Mm.
mixing the two things, and that's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So please feel free to look at the website and come along to a constellation in Bristol. My evening workshops are just 3 hours. I do full day ones, but people like to come just for a few hours just to experience the
Mm.
work. So yeah,
Yeah.
please feel free to get in touch until you see me at Elevate in August.
Oh, I can't wait.
And me, I'm
Thank
looking
you
forward,
very
really
much.
looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you so much.